Can faith actually be logical? I mean, for centuries, that question has been the source of endless debate. Well, today, we're going to dive into a series of arguments that try to build like a rational bridge to belief. Let's see how they stack up. All right, let's just jump right in with a question that I think, we've all asked ourselves at some point. When you see something just truly awful, a terrible injustice, a senseless act of cruelty, and that word just pops into your head, evil. Where does that come from? I mean, that deep gut feeling that something is fundamentally wrong. Well, the source material we're digging into today uses that exact question to kick everything off. And, well, that question leads us straight into our first big idea, what's called the argument from morality. The core thought here is pretty simple, actually. What if that internal compass we all seem to have, what if it's not just random? What if it's actually pointing towards something real, something outside of us? Okay, so look at this, because this really gets to the heart of the argument. You see the difference here, right? Saying, I don't like that, that's just your preference. It's subjective. It's like saying you don't like broccoli. But when you say that is wrong, you're doing something totally different. You're appealing to a higher standard, something bigger than just your own opinion. The whole point is, without some kind of fixed, objective standard of good, then the word evil doesn't really mean anything. It's just your opinion versus mine. So the obvious next question is, where would a standard like that even come from? Well, the source material points us to this passage from the book of Romans. And the argument being made here is that this sense of right and wrong, it isn't something humanity just, cooked up one day. The idea is that it's woven into the very fabric of creation itself, something that's been plain to see from the very beginning. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. We've been looking inward at our moral universe. Now we're going to zoom out and look at the physical universe, the cosmos itself. This brings us to the next piece of the puzzle, the argument from cosmology. The big question, where did all this come from? So the source lays out this really clear three-step argument, and it's actually rooted in modern physics. Step one, we can see, we can measure that the universe is constantly expanding. Okay. Step two, the second law of thermodynamics. It's a fundamental rule of the universe that says everything tends to run down, to go from order to disorder. Think of a hot cup of coffee cooling down, right? So if you put those two things together, an expanding universe that's constantly running down, and you try to rewind the clock, you can't go back forever. Eventually, you have to hit a point of maximum order, a single starting point, a beginning. And that leads to this really powerful conclusion. It's a pretty straightforward line of reasoning. If the universe had a beginning, then it must have had a beginner. The main takeaway here is that an event like the Big Bang, a finite moment in time, it just has to have a cause that exists outside of it. Now, I know what some of you are probably thinking. Hold on, this isn't science, this is philosophy. And you're right, that's a super common objection, but that's exactly what this next section gets into. The source makes this really crucial distinction between science as a tool, as a method for understanding the physical world, and a belief system that says science is the only way to know anything. And that belief system has a name. It's called scientism. It's basically the idea that if you can't test it in a lab, it's not real knowledge. But here's the kicker, and the source points this out really clearly. That very statement, science is the only source of real knowledge, you can't prove that with science. It's a philosophical belief about science. So the belief system kind of defeats itself right out of the gate. And just to drive this point home, think about all the things we experience every day that science just can't measure. You can't put love in a test tube. You can't weigh justice on a scale. Science is amazing for measuring the physical world, but what about these other things? Meaning, beauty, and yes, God. The argument is that these things are metaphysical. They exist, that they're beyond what physics can touch. So you can see how the source is using these kinds of distinctions to build its case, piece by piece. Hey, and if you're finding this way of breaking down these big ideas helpful, it would be awesome if you could take a quick second to like, share, and subscribe. It honestly helps us a ton and lets us keep making more explainers just like this one. We really appreciate it. Okay, so keeping that distinction in mind, this verse from 1 Peter really becomes central to the whole approach we're exploring today. It frames this entire thing not as some kind of blind leap in the dark, but as an invitation to actually use your reason, to be ready to give an answer, a logical defense for the hope that you have. All right, so we've looked at morality, we've looked at the cosmos, and we've talked about reason itself. But so what? Where does all of this lead? Well, our final section is all about how the source pulls all these different threads together to point toward a very specific answer, the Christian worldview. And this right here, this is the cornerstone. It all centers on that Greek word logos. Now, it's often translated as word, but it means so much more than that. It's the logic, the reason, the underlying order of the entire universe. And the incredible claim being made here is that this logos, this cosmic logic, became a person, Jesus. The idea is that the reason behind the universe became someone you could know. So, what about that question we started with? The problem of evil and suffering. The source argues that the Christian answer isn't some tidy philosophical explanation that tries to explain away our pain. Instead, the answer is an event, the cross. The claim is that this is the moment where God, instead of staying distant and explaining things, actually enters into our suffering, into betrayal, injustice, and pain right alongside us. And this leads to a pretty profound idea, a real theological puzzle. How can a God who is perfectly good and just simply forgive evil? Wouldn't that compromise justice? Well, the source presents the cross as the unique answer to that problem, a moment where justice is fully satisfied, which then allows God to be both perfectly just when confronting evil, and at the same time, the justifier who can extend mercy. And so that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If all these arguments from reason and evidence can build a path, if they can point us in a certain direction, what's the role of faith? Is faith a blind leap into the dark? Or is it that final step of trust you take onto a path that reason has already lit up for you? That's the thought we're going to leave you with today. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. And hey, if you haven't already, please do like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. We'll see you next time. Can faith